So, in the first of my reflections for Holy Week, I want to start with a place where Jesus was actually a bit overburdened, well, to say the least. Matthew chapter 26 and the story of the Garden of Gethsemane, where Matthew tells us they went to a place called Gethsemane, and Jesus said to his disciples, "You stay here while I pray." And then he took Peter, James, and John with him, and he began to be deeply distressed and troubled. "My soul's overwhelmed," he said, "with sorrow to the point of death." He said, "Stay here, you keep watch." And going a little further on, he fell to the ground and prayed that if possible this hour might pass from him. "Abba, Father," he said, "everything's possible for you. Take this cup from me. Yet not what I will, but what you will." Then he returned to the disciples and found them sleeping. "Oh, Simon," he said to Peter, "are you asleep? Couldn't you keep watch for 1 hour? Watch and pray so that you'll not fall into temptation. The spirit's willing, but the flesh is weak." Once more he went away and prayed the same thing, and when he came back he again found them sleeping because their eyes were heavy. They didn't know what to say to him, and returning the third time he said to them, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Enough, the hour's come. Look, the Son of Man's delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let's go. Here comes my betrayer." I guess we're all familiar with that story. It's a tough time for Jesus. It's probably the toughest moment in terms of emotional turmoil of the whole of the Easter story. Gives us an interesting insight into Jesus' character, I think. Because, of course, even though you're the Son of God, doesn't mean that you have no challenges. I've been thinking about this passage because I think we often imagine that this was Jesus putting the disciples right. Why are you asleep? Why are you not awake? Why are you not doing your business? I want to invite you to look at it today from a slightly different perspective. First of all, it highlights for us, I think, Jesus' sense of personal vulnerability. One of the things that comes across in all the Gospels, not just in Matthew, is that Jesus was a leader who was quite unlike the kind of macho qualities that we often reflect and admire in leadership today. He was someone who needed support, someone who accepted his need, and he always did. That's a major reason, actually, why he was so attractive to people and why his leadership style was so distinctive. He was personally open, transparent, and that made him vulnerable. I guess we've inherited a different image in the society more widely, as well as in church, of course, that real men don't have either feelings or problems, that a real man in Gethsemane could have dealt with it all single-handed by himself. I think there's an invitation here and also a challenge for the church to be like Jesus, in recognizing that we can't cope alone, and we need to create communities of faith in which we find genuine support and friendship. I think the one thing we all suffer from today is a kind of fragmentation of our communities, home communities as well as what's going on in the wider culture. Work situations are increasingly pressurized for many people. Competitiveness and winning are top of the agenda, which often means undermining, if not destroying, friendships. I've often reflected, in missional terms, that if church just offers more of the conflict that we deal with in our everyday lives, why should we expect anyone to come and join us? What would be the unique selling point, if you like, of church life if it's basically just a version of the same thing that we find everywhere else? So it's not just vulnerability, though. I think patience is the other thing that comes across to me as a lesson that we need to learn in terms of reflecting on this story. I mean, actually, the disciples were exhausted. If you read the rest of the narrative, you'll begin to wonder, well, when did they get any sleep? You know? There were plenty of good reasons why they should have been asleep at this moment in time. I mean, maybe they just didn't know how to do it all anyway. Jesus doesn't rebuke them for being human, but for wasting the opportunity that was offered by this kind of tiny hiatus in the ongoing events. He doesn't rebuke them for falling asleep so much as wasting this opportunity to be intentionally reflective. I mean, this comes after the excitement of Palm Sunday. And here was a space where they could recharge their batteries, where they could reflect on what's going on. And instead of using it intentionally, they just crashed out. I wonder if there's something in here for the church as well. Whether we like it or not, we've been handed a space for reflection. It's a space that's been created, admittedly, by decline, by the lack of interest, apparently, in matters of faith and certainly of religious institutions in the wider culture. I wonder if we are called to intentionally use this space, reflecting on what's next, rather than either falling asleep in it or indeed going to our main default, which is activism. Activists like to be up and doing things. But actually, we've done it all. We've had all the theories. We've had all the ideas. We've tried everything out, and it doesn't seem to make much difference. Today, I wonder if this is the church's Gethsemane, where we're faced with so many challenges that we literally cry out to God and say, God, just make this disappear. We can't handle it anymore. Maybe the message of Jesus is, don't just waste this opportunity. Don't just fall asleep. Certainly don't just do more of the same. I mean, you remember what Albert Einstein said about that. It's the road to insanity, doing more of the same and expecting a different outcome. We need to wait, perhaps with intention, connecting with God, supporting one another, and like the waiting father in the story of the prodigal son, getting the house in order for when there is a spiritual return. Being intentional, expectant, waiting, praying, and preparing. I've worked with many churches over the years, and one of the things that's always been central in the revitalization of any congregation or any missional context has been a sense of spending time with God, praying, reflecting, being quiet, taking time out, if you like, often spending 3 months, 6 months, a year even, doing nothing, but actually doing everything by spending time renewing our own spiritual devotion, spending time praying together, and then actually going forward to address the challenges that are absolutely in front of us today. So maybe that's the question I want to leave you with on this first day of Holy Week. Is this our Gethsemane? Are we going to fall asleep, pretend it doesn't happen? Are we going to become activists and think we can sort it out? Or will we take the opportunity, as saints throughout the centuries have discovered, just to spend time reflecting, praying, yes, and expecting that something dramatic, which might also be painful, is about to happen. Don't forget to join me tomorrow for further reflections on other aspects of the story. And God bless you, through this Holy Week. May it be a holy time for us all.